You're listening to What is Black podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Duget. We are joined by a very special guest, author illustrator Jerry Craft. He will share insights into his new middle grade graphic novel, New Kid. So let's get started with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of my podcast. I have a special guest with me this evening, Jerry Craft. He's an author and illustrator. We're going to focus a lot of this episode on his new book, his middle grade graphic novel, New Kid. But I just want to introduce and thank Jerry for joining us this evening. So how are you doing today, Jerry?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
All right. I'm doing very well. So first I wanted to just give you an opportunity to sort of share a little bit of your bio for our listeners.
Okay, so Jerry Craft, I'm an author illustrator. I was born in Harlem and grew up in Washington Heights, which is the next section up. I have been self-publishing books for about 20 years. And 2014, I did a book for Scholastic that I illustrated called The 0 Degree Zombie Zone. And then my middle grade graphic novel, New Kid, came out on February 5th. So that's what's been taking the bulk of my waking hours, is promoting that and traveling and doing school visits. And it's been wonderful. I've had a great time so far.
So in doing some research for the book, I saw a couple of promos for the book. And this seems like this was really a labor of love for you to write the book. So I was just wondering, what influenced you to write the book, and what was sort of the inspiration for writing the book?
Okay, so it's kind of a combination of my life and the lives of my two sons. So, like I said, I grew up in Washington Heights. I did always want to be an artist. I was not a reader, so I really gravitated towards comic books and comic strips, because comic strips were much shorter. Comic books, because normally you work with a writer, although when I was a kid, I wrote and drew my own. My parents did not think that anyone, not just me, could ever make a living as an author, specifically as an artist. So instead of me being able to go to art and design or music and art in New York City, they urged me to go to Fieldston, which was a private school in Riverdale known for its academics. So I basically went there for 4 years, and it was a total culture shock. Meeting kids that I had only seen from watching TV, the Brady Bunch and Partridge Family. And now all of a sudden I went from a class that had, 25 kids in the class, of which, 23 were African-American, to now being one of 10 African-American kids in a ninth grade class of about 110 kids. And then years later, when I became a dad, my sons went to a private school in New Canaan, Connecticut. So they had similar experiences, but it was a little different because they went there from an early age, and my wife and I were able to prepare them a little bit more to let them know like what they were in store for. And I think we were more able to kind of just watch out for them and have more discussions than my parents had with me.
So I guess we can maybe take a step back a little bit, because I sort of jumped into, maybe we should set the setting a little bit about, if you want to give us a summary of what New Kid is about, and then we can. Okay. I think that'll probably tie better your background. So I kind of went backwards, but I think it's still fine. I think it's still a great.
We'll go forward, because what I can say is I had done all these different stories as I self-published. So it's interesting that the one that has basically been labeled as my breakout book is a book loosely based on my life. Okay. So, like I said, I wanted to go to an art school, and my parents didn't want me to. And so when I went to Fieldston, it was just definitely a much different world altogether, because most of my friends and neighbors were African American or Puerto Rican or later on Dominican. So it was really something that I wanted to put on paper, because it is a classic fish out of water story that so many middle grade graphic novels are, that's kind of the theme. But it's also, he's kind of, Jordan Banks is the main character. He's kind of a fish out of two waters, because, in the African American community, some neighborhoods, as you start to do things like go to a private school or vacation some places or do, other things, maybe go away to college, sometimes there's some backlash with the community as far as like, oh, you think you're all that, or you think you're better, or you think you're this. So I made sure to show both aspects of Jordan Banks' life and his conflicts of not only wanting to fit in at his new school, but still trying to maintain his friends from around his block.
Which I think you did a great job of doing. And I could sort of relate to both ends of the spectrum. Jordan's character. Now I made the transition. I went to public school in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Washington, D.C., went to public school and then went to Catholic school. So that was like for middle school. So that was like a big shift for me. Right. And then it was high school. And that was like the other big shift, right? So freshman year, so my Catholic school was predominantly African American, and then to go to like this other Catholic school, sort of prestigious Catholic school. And again, I was one of a few people. So I was like, okay, so I related to Jordan's character. And then I think also too, now, okay, I won't give away my age, but let's say, so I'm a mom now of almost one adult, like a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old. So I could totally relate to the mom in the book. My kids, roll their eyes. Right. I constantly ask them questions, or like, I'm embarrassing them, or, loving on them too much. Right. Right. Which can be kind of embarrassing. So I thought that was great how you were able to relate. And then, I have nieces. I also have, and I think my kids have somewhat gone through that experience, but it's still public school. Again, so I think it's very relatable, and I loved how you did that. And I'm like, every time I was looking at the mom's character, I'm like, oh my gosh,
I really wanted to show a wide variety of people, not only African American, but people in general, without really vilifying any of them. So I wanted to give, like, obviously Jordan Banks his time to shine, but then I wanted to give his mom, her spotlight and show what kind of person she is. She's a corporate dynamo and wants Jordan to go to this private school because it will open up doors that he may not get other places. I wanted to give his dad some time because, his dad was in the corporate world, but really is more about making a difference in his community. And I didn't necessarily have one being right and one being wrong. They argue a little bit, but I just throw out two opinions, and I let the reader pick who he or she would like to identify with. And then there are Black characters that Jordan has nothing in common with, and that was also something in Fieldston, meeting kids who might have been at Fieldston since first grade and had more in common with the other white kids from Riverdale than they did with me and my friends, even though we were all African-American. So there's a big socioeconomic and a big class and classism aspect that I wanted to touch on also in the book.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you checked a lot of boxes. And it was also very, very fun to read. Like you injected humor, and I guess that was intentional. I'm just wondering how you decided to maybe take a humorous perspective versus maybe more of like a serious. Because I think this could have had like a more serious tone to it. For some of the things that the character experienced.
Oh, it definitely could have. But I think so much of the stuff that is aimed towards our kids is serious, and there are some really, really great books out there, but you don't see a lot that just let kids kind of laugh and be silly. So even though there are definitely some serious conversations in New Kid, I definitely wanted to make it, laugh out loud funny, at least in my opinion, laugh out loud funny, so that a kid could read it and just kind of relax, and there are definitely times where they're just being silly. They're talking about, who would win, Black Panther or Batman, or, who's faster, or, like that kind of thing. So that, you don't always have to be so tense when you read, because I read some books that are just page turns. I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And there are just times where I just wanted the kids to laugh and say, hey, you know what? This is kind of a cool book. I like this, and it was funny.
Yeah, but I do take. Again, I think there's a clip where they compare Batman versus Black Panther that you brought up. I think they said it's a tie. I think Black Panther would beat Batman personally.
Yeah, I was being nice because, Jordan throughout the book talks about feeling like Batman because Batman never really fits in, and he does this, he does that. So I just want to dog Batman, but if I had to pick, I'd be Team Black Panther. So
yeah, I'm not mad.
Just so you know.
Yeah, I'm not mad at Batman. I like Batman too.
Okay.
But
okay,
I just think like after seeing that that successful movie, right, the Marvel character, because I didn't grow up reading comics, and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that I grew up, I tended to read more serious books, or that's what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember comics because my parents were immigrants, so they were like, you know what, you gotta read all the academic books, right?
Gotcha.
To get to the next place. And so it's now as I'm getting older, I'm like, okay, it's like all these books that I'm getting refamiliarized with.
Right. And see, I was the opposite. I was not a reader except for comics. So, as I got older, I had to kind of backtrack and read some of the books that I had not read as a kid just because I just wasn't really interested. So, yeah, we came from the opposite ends of the spectrum with that.
But we still ended up with Black Panther. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about about your interest in comic books and comic strips, because again, in doing some research, I learned, and I hadn't known this before, that you're one of the co-founders or co-organizers for the Black Comic Book Festival. And I wanted to hear a little bit more about how that came about, and I guess how that kind of, again, that intersection for you and your love of comic books, how that came about, and you were able to use that love of comic books to sort of develop this festival.
Oh, sure. So from my involvement, I had a conversation with Turtle Only, my buddy in Chicago, and we talked about doing a Black Comic Book Day where maybe we could have some kind of, event in different cities across the country. So he did one event in Chicago, and I did an event at Human Bookstore in Harlem. And that went pretty well. And then the next year we did it again, and it was even better. And then Human Bookstore closed their doors, so I needed to find a new home. So I talked to the people at the Schomburg Research Library in Harlem, and they had also been approached by John Jennings, who had an exhibit called Black Kirby. and Jonathan Gales, who had more of an academic approach where he wanted to have, academics come and do panels. And we got together with Deirdre Holman, who was working there at the Schomburg, and we kind of just merged all of our ideas. And I believe it was 2014, we did the first annual Schomburg Black Comic Book Fest. So we had the exhibit, we had panelists, we had a ton of authors and artists come in. And over the years, we went from like 1,000 the first year to 5,000. And then one year we had about 10,000 people come in just on Saturday. So then we split it into 2 days, Friday and Saturday. And it's Martin Luther King Day every year, Martin Luther King weekend, the Friday and Saturday. And we just had the 6th annual one. And it's been pretty amazing. Now people come from all over the U.S. and Canada, and even further than that, to either vend or just come and meet their favorite authors and artists and get autographs and buy lots of books. So it's one of the best events that I've attended, and so I'm just proud to be a co-founder.
I mean, because I think that's amazing. Because again, the way I grew up is definitely different from where how my kids have grown up and their exposure. But are you finding that is there a trend for more creators of color to write comic books, or especially even black illustrators, writers?
Yeah, I think there's always been an independent grouping of black authors and artists. So that's always been there. But I feel like with 2018 of having both the Black Panther movie set all kinds of box office records, as well as ending the year with the Into the Spider-Verse cartoon, now they see that you can actually have viable success stories with, that star African-American protagonist. That is something that now people are like, hey, this can make money. So I know 2 years ago, that was the first time where all of a sudden you saw editors from different publishing houses coming and introducing themselves and handing out business cards. And there have definitely been a few of the creators who have gotten, contracts or, been able to pitch stuff since then. So I definitely think that it is getting better. And I also think that the opportunity with me doing this book for HarperCollins, one of the 5 largest publishers in the world, being able to do that and go on tour and really be one of the few, especially bringing humor stories to middle grade graphic novels with black protagonists, I think will hopefully energize that as well and get more of us in the field.
Now, do you see New Kid being a series or more of a standalone, or do you have plans for other ideas for other graphic novels?
Oh, that script for New Kid 2 is already submitted to my editor.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so we are looking for it to be released in fall of 2020, which is actually next fall. So I am already very busy so that I can make that deadline. And I can talk to you again this time next year. We could talk about New Kid 2.
All right, that sounds cool. And I think before we wrap up, I wanted to talk a little bit about a quote that's on your webpage. I thought it was a great quote. You said that you make books that you wish you had when you were a kid. So I'm paraphrasing. You actually said, I make the books I wish I had when I was a kid. And I was wondering, do you feel that you're actualizing that thought?
Yeah, I really do, because again, there are authors that really get like the historical fiction thing. And then you see some authors that do like contemporary gang life or, things like that. That is not, I have read them and I have enjoyed them, but the books that I always wanted was like when you see a kid reading a Captain Underpants or a Diary of a Wimpy Kid, something that, had some lessons, but you can really relate to the characters in a humorous way, that is what I wanted to do, to have like iconic characters so that when you say like a Greg Heffley or a Percy Jackson, hopefully one day you'll say Jordan Banks in the same level. And kids are like, oh, yeah, of course we know Jordan Banks, black kids and white kids. So I am really living what I have set out to do. So from that perspective, I couldn't be happier. So, and the fact that HarperCollins wants not just one more book, but two more books in the series, hopefully can really lay down the foundation for Jordan Banks and Drew and Liam to really be like these iconic characters of color.
I think you're off to a great start. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jerry.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to What is Black Podcast. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, rate, and review, and tell a friend. Until next time.